Some people see scars as flaws, as reminders of pain, things to be hidden. But for others, scars are proof that they survived, that they endured, that they refused to let trauma define them. And this story is about one woman whose scars told the truth in a room full of liars who thought cruelty was clever, who laughed at her pain without knowing her strength, and how she responded not with vengeance, but with vision, with a quiet storm of intelligence, dignity, and the kind of justice that makes people remember her name long after the jokes stop. This is the story of Kesha Johnson, a waitress, a veteran, and a woman who changed everything without ever raising her voice. The scene opens at Ray's Diner, a modest spot tucked between a dry cleaner and a hardware store. The kind of place where the coffee is always hot, the waitresses remember your name, and the pancakes come with a side of small talk. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And that's why Kesha worked there, because after everything she'd been through, she didn't need glitz, she needed peace. She was 34, sharp-eyed, with a calm energy that made people feel settled until they looked at her face, because Kesha had visible burn scars that reached from her left temple down to her collarbone. And for some customers, those scars were all they saw every Tuesday at 12:15. A group of corporate guys would come in, sit at table 6 near the window, and make themselves loud enough for the entire room to hear. They wore tailored suits, expensive watches, and smugness like cologne. They didn't just laugh, they broadcasted it using their voices like weapons, and Kesha always served them. Not because she wanted to, but because none of the other servers could stand them, and because Kesha had a reason. One they didn't know yet. The ringleader of the group was Brett Davidson, mid-40s, white male, loud, arrogant, with a smile that looked more like a smirk. And every time Kesha approached their table, the energy shifted. He'd nudge his coworkers, mutter something cruel, and laugh. He called her Freddy Krueger. Scarface Burn Girl said she looked like she fell asleep on a grill. And the worst part was he didn't even whisper. He said it loud enough for the next table to hear, loud enough for his friends to laugh, but soft enough to pretend it was harmless. And I want to stop here because this behavior isn't fiction. It happens in real diners, real offices, real classrooms where people use cruelty as a currency to buy power among their peers. Mocking someone who can't or won't fight back becomes their cheap form of entertainment, and it's not a joke. It's harassment. It's dehumanizing. It leaves wounds deeper than any scar can show. But Kesha never flinched, never fought back. She smiled politely, took their order, brought their drinks, and walked away without a word. And that silence made Brett bolder. He figured she was too weak, too ashamed, too powerless to fight back. But what he didn't know was that Kesha wasn't ignoring him. She was watching, she was listening, and most importantly, she was remembering names, titles, conversations. Even the company they worked for, Mitchell and Associates, a business consulting firm with a reputation for aggressive restructuring and quietly controversial firings. And every time Brett made a joke, Kesha logged it, not in anger, but in strategy. Because some people fight with fists, others with facts, and Kesha had a plan. What Brett also didn't realize was that he wasn't the only one watching at a corner booth near the window. An older black man named James Wright sat sipping his coffee every Tuesday at the same time he'd been coming there for months, a quiet observer, always polite. And that day something clicked for James. The way Kesha stood, the way she controlled her breathing, the calm under fire. It was familiar too. Familiar. James was a retired Marine, and he'd seen that posture before, not in diners, but in desert bases, in field hospitals in the middle of war zones. He recognized it because he'd lived it. And that's when he noticed the faded ink just visible beneath the rolled sleeve of Kesha's uniform. A military tattoo, not decorative but earned. And suddenly Kesha wasn't just a waitress, she was a soldier, a survivor, someone who had faced fire and come back whole in the ways that mattered most. And Brett was mocking not just her scars, but her service, and James knew he couldn't stay silent forever. The following Tuesday, the same group came in right on time. Brett strutted through the door like a man arriving at his own award ceremony, slapping the back of one coworker, mocking another's tie, and launching into a loud story about how he got someone fired for bad attitude, which really meant standing up to him the moment he saw Kesha. His smile twisted into a sneer, and he leaned over and whispered loud enough for his crew to hear. "Showtime, Freddy's back, hide." The lighters, and they all laughed like schoolboys trying to impress each other. Kesha didn't blink, didn't react. She poured their waters, took their orders, and walked back to the counter with the same calm that unnerved them more than 1,000 words ever could. And this is where we see the brilliance of restraint. Because in a society that constantly dares you to react, sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is remain composed. But across the room, James decided it was time to move. He stood up, walked to the counter, and quietly asked for a coffee refill, then leaned in and said quietly, "You served." I can tell Keisha's eyes flicked up. Surprised, maybe a little guarded. "Yes," she said, "Iraq 3 tours trauma specialist." You, James nodded. "Yes, ma'am, Marine 21 years. He paused. "You hold yourself like you're still on duty." Kesha gave a half-smile, muscle memory, and James said something that stuck with her. "You don't need to salute to command respect." And in that moment, Kesha realized she wasn't alone. Someone saw her, not the scars, not the uniform, not the past, but the strength that still lived under all of it. The next few visits followed the same script. Brett mocking the others, laughing. Kesha staying silent. But Brett had a new twist this time. He pulled out his phone and began recording under the guise of showing his team what kind of customer service they could expect from a diner. In this part of town, his voice full of contempt, "Watch this," he said into the camera. "This is Kesha. She's our regular horror film waitress. They should put a jump scare on the menu." Kesha paused, tray in hand, looked directly into the lens and smiled. The kind of smile that makes people uneasy because it's not fake or friendly. It's knowing. She leaned forward just slightly and said, "Would you like to know how I got these scars?" Brett blinked, thrown off by the unexpected question. "Well, yeah, that's what we've been wondering." She nodded calmly. "Roadside bomb outside Mosul, Iraq, 2010. I was pulling an injured corporal from a Humvee when the second blast went off. They told me I should have died, but I didn't." She straightened and said softly, "So now I serve breakfast instead of bodies, and I wear my scars because some of my friends didn't make it back to earn theirs." And for a split second, the table went quiet. Not out of guilt, but confusion, as if their scripts had been suddenly rewritten. Brett tried to laugh it off. "Damn, I didn't ask for a TED Talk," but his voice cracked and Kesha, still smiling, asked, "And where did you serve Brett?" His mouth opened, then closed. "No answer exactly," Kesha said and walked away. And that's the power of earned truth. When someone builds their life on performance and posturing, they can't stand in front of real courage because it reflects what they lack. And here's where it gets interesting. That night, Brett uploaded the video of his exchange with Kesha. Thinking it would go viral as a joke, he captioned it, "Diner Diva goes full PTSD on me." But the internet had other plans. The clip started circulating, and within hours people had tracked down who she was, and more importantly, who he was. And instead of laughter, the video triggered outrage. Thousands of comments poured in, not just about the cruelty of mocking a burn survivor, but about the disrespect shown to a combat veteran. And this reflects a broader shift we've seen in public culture. The idea that you can humiliate someone in private and hide behind jokes is crumbling. Social media doesn't forget, and when injustice is caught on camera, it doesn't always fade away. Sometimes it erupts, and Kesha's quiet strength lit that fuse. But even as the video spread, Kesha stayed silent. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew this wasn't her final move. This was just the reveal, because what Brett didn't know was that Kesha had been collecting information for months, not for revenge, but for justice. Every cruel joke, every discriminatory comment, every illegal firing policy, he bragged about all of it. Recorded, filed, and stored, and she was about to use it not to destroy him, but to expose the systems that allowed him to thrive unchecked. By Thursday, the video had surpassed 2 million views. By Friday, national outlets had picked it up. Headlines read, "War Hero Waitress Shuts Down Executive's Cruel Mockery." And for the first time in a long time, people were saying Kesha's name, not in hushed tones or behind her back, but with respect, with admiration, with the clarity that only comes when truth is too loud to ignore. And yet through it all, Kesha remained grounded. She still worked her shift, still wiped tables, still refilled coffee as if the world hadn't flipped outside the walls of Ray's diner. Because for her, none of this was about fame. It was about clarity. It was about drawing a line between decency and cowardice and showing what real resilience looks like. Meanwhile, Brett's life began unraveling. Mitchell and Associates announced an internal investigation. His clients started dropping statements were issued distancing themselves from the scandal, and within a week, Brett Davidson's name was scrubbed from the company website. The consequences didn't end there. Labor investigators now had access to months of audio files recorded by Kesha, which captured Brett admitting to firing employees based on race, gender, and even age, boasting about dodging HR laws and manipulating severance agreements. Those files became the foundation of a federal case. And this is where the story becomes bigger than Brett or Kesha. This is where we see how individual cruelty can reveal systemic injustice. Because what Brett said in public was only the surface. Beneath it lay a culture of exclusion, rationalized in polished boardrooms and cleaned up in press releases, but recorded clearly by a waitress with a burn scar and a plan. And while the company crumbled, Kesha rose quietly with intention, with purpose. Veterans groups reached out. Nonprofits wanted her to speak schools, invited her to share her story, and she began consulting on workplace inclusion. Not because she had to, but because she understood what too many forget, that being marginalized doesn't make you voiceless. It just means your voice has been ignored until the right moment, and now people were listening. She still worked at the diner, at least part-time. She said that place was a reminder of where truth lives, not in headlines, but in human connection. In the small nod from a regular, the smile from a new mother balancing a baby and a coffee cup, the handshake from James, who now stopped by every Tuesday, just to say thank you. And one Tuesday morning, Brett came back, not with arrogance, but with hesitation. He looked older in just a few weeks, or maybe just less protected. He approached the counter where Kesha stood wiping down a register and said, "I came to apologize." She didn't look up, just said, "I know you did." He paused, fumbled with his hands. "I was wrong. It wasn't personal. I didn't mean to ruin your life." She finally met his eyes and said quietly, "But clearly, you didn't ruin my life. You just revealed who you really were." And it wasn't a misunderstanding, Brett. It was a moment of truth, and you lost. And that's where their conversation ended. No dramatic forgiveness, no shouting, just the final weight of a truth Brett could no longer run from. And that is what makes this story resonate. Because so often we're told to forgive and forget to take the high road to suppress the sting of injustice. But Kesha didn't take the high road. She walked her own road, a harder road, a lonelier one, but one paved with courage and intention. And that made all the difference. And here's the lesson. The one we too often overlook: scars are not signs of weakness. They are proof of survival. They are the medals worn by those who kept going when others would have quit, who endured what should have broken them, and still chose kindness over cruelty, strategy over spite, wisdom over war. Kesha's story isn't just about one man's fall, it's about one woman's rise and the silent army behind her. Every person who has ever been mocked for their difference, dismissed for their appearance, judged for what they carry instead of who they are. It's about power reclaimed, not with fists but with facts and patience, and a steady gaze that never wavers when met with hate. It's about the beauty of quiet resistance and the power of public truth, because sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one that waited the longest to be heard.